The Metroid Prime Trilogy is one of the most heavily rumored ports for the Nintendo Switch, and I think there are some good reasons why Nintendo could put the Metroid Prime Trilogy out on the Switch. But just because something's heavily rumored and makes some sense to do, doesn't mean it's going to happen. Sometimes even things that are heavily rumored turn out to be fake. Oh, Redkwan, like Star Fox Grand Prix? Nope, that's still definitely happening. And while a Metroid Prime Trilogy makes sense in some ways it doesn't really make sense. And based on what Nintendo has done so far with the Switch, there are definitely some reasons to doubt it. So now I'm going to look at the reasons for and against for approximately 6.5 minutes, and spit out some conclusion with fairly low confidence. That was a joke, I know everything. Hello all 2,270 of you, I'm Redkwan, and will the Metroid Prime Trilogy happen on the Switch? So first of all, why might something like this make sense? Well, the main reason would be Metroid Prime 4. Metroid Prime 4 is in development, and while it was delayed, it's probably still going to be on the Switch. And if Nintendo wants Metroid to make the biggest impact it can, it would make sense that they would get people excited about the series on the whole. The original trilogy of games was very well received, and by putting these games out on the Switch, Nintendo would be able to introduce new fans to the series and get old fans reinvested, which could make Metroid Prime 4 even more successful. Also, it shouldn't be terribly difficult to make, Nintendo already has each of these games made, so it wouldn't be nearly as much work as making these games from scratch. It would also just in general be a fairly quick and safe way to fill up a gap in the release schedule and make some money. Plus, these games are so well received, it would just look good on Nintendo's part to have such a good game come out. So there are quite a few very good reasons to make a Metroid Prime Trilogy. It gets people ready for Metroid Prime 4, and it makes a decent amount of money fairly easily relative to making a new game. It seems to make a lot of sense, but at the same time, it doesn't seem quite right. First of all, while a Metroid Prime Trilogy would take less time and effort than a fully new game, it would still take a lot more work than something like a Wii U port would. The Metroid Prime Trilogy released on the Wii, and the first two Metroid Prime games came out back on the GameCube, so the graphics would definitely need to be updated, and the controls would also need to be changed for the Switch. In theory, the Switch could probably use a version of the GameCube's control scheme for the first two Metroid Prime games, but the way the GameCube Metroid Prime games controlled isn't all that intuitive anymore, and they would have to change the motion controls for Prime 3 anyway, so they might as well change the whole control scheme for all three games. That's definitely doable, but again, changing the graphics and controls of these classic games is both a lot of effort and a lot more risky than something like a Wii U port is. And even with the benefits, I'm not sure Nintendo would want to pour in that much time for something that isn't a new game. Also, the idea of a Metroid Prime Trilogy doesn't really fit with what seems to be Nintendo's philosophy with old games right now. The only real ports we've gotten on the Switch are from the Wii U, and those work because they're easy and not many people played them. They still look fine and play fine, so Nintendo can sort of pass them off like new games. Plenty of people want to play games from older systems on the Switch, like GameCube games and Wii games and so on, but so far Nintendo hasn't really done anything like that. The closest thing is a Game Boy Zelda remake that they sold for $60. I mean, I'm sure it was good, but still, it's a single Game Boy game. I know Nintendo put out the Metroid Prime Trilogy before, but it seems like they've realized that people will buy their old games individually and at full price, and releasing the whole Metroid Prime Trilogy, which people are dying to get, and which could easily pass as 3 full games, seems a little unlikely to me. It just doesn't seem like Nintendo would put in the time and effort to bring 3 full games to the modern era, and then sell the entire package for $60. Again, they sold a Game Boy remake for $60. Also, there's the fact that games that have gotten ported to the Switch haven't gotten new entries in their series. All the Nintendo Wii U ports we've gotten on the Switch, Donkey Kong, Mario Kart, New Super Mario Bros., Captain Toad, Pokken Tournament, and Hyrule Warriors, haven't gotten a new game in their series on the Switch. They still could, but for most of these, I think the ports are going to be their only Switch entries. It seems like ports are being used as a replacement for series on the Switch, so that Nintendo fills the obligation for each of these series, but still has room for other things. The thing is though, we already know Metroid Prime 4 is coming. We wouldn't get the Metroid Prime Trilogy as a fill-in for Metroid on the Switch, and recently that seems to be how Nintendo's using ports. The one thing that sort of goes against this is the fact that back on the Wii U, when Zelda was taking forever, we got GameCube remakes of 2 Zelda games. This seems like it could be a similar situation, with Metroid Prime 4 taking longer than it should have, and some GameCube remakes could be a good idea. The difference though is that Metroid isn't as big of a series as Zelda, and while people would be upset if they had to wait the whole lifetime of the Wii U without a Zelda game, people can get by without Metroid remakes to hold them over. Also, Nintendo was still able to release those as their own games instead of a set, and I feel like Nintendo's philosophy on that sort of thing has changed since the Wii U. So while it makes sense in some big ways, a Metroid Prime Trilogy seems like it'd be more work than Nintendo would want to put in, not fill the type of purpose Nintendo likes their ports to fill, and to be honest, be too good of a value. So will we get a Metroid Prime Trilogy? Well, I think it could really go either way. From the standpoint of getting people ready for Metroid Prime 4, as well as making some relatively easy money, it seems to make sense. But based on how Nintendo's been treating these types of things on the Switch, it doesn't really seem to fit. I can definitely see the case for it, and I wouldn't be super surprised if it does happen, but if I had to guess, I'd say it probably isn't happening. It would be a lot more work than most ports and that sort of thing would be, and with a medium-sized series like Metroid, it might not have that big of a payoff. Plus, it just doesn't fit with what Nintendo seems to be doing with their ports, and while Nintendo obviously does unpredictable things sometimes, I can't see them releasing a fully remastered trilogy of these games on the Switch, especially with Metroid Prime 4 probably being just a couple years away now. I guess in theory they could release the games individually, but releasing 3 full Metroid remasters seems like about the unlikeliest possibility of them all. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably too close to the release of Metroid Prime 4, too much work to get it ready, and too many things for Nintendo to sell for just $60 to make the Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Switch. Again, I don't think it's out of the question, because it still does make some sense, but it doesn't really seem like it's the decision Nintendo would make, and if I had to guess, I'd say we won't get the Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Switch. Well, there's 6.5 minutes and a very unconfident conclusion for you. I wasn't lying about that. That was not a joke. Well, I'm Redkwan. Do you think we'll get the Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Switch? Do you want to see it come to the Switch? Am I too late on this topic and I'll just look stupid now? Probably. Yeah, probably. At least I found a way to make a Star Fox Grand Prix joke, so this isn't a total loss. Anyways, I'm Redkwan. Thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all later. Goodbye.